let me go ahead and record this. The last one recorded pretty well, but I got a little visit from my grandson in the middle of the lecture. So that was kind of fun, but also kind of noisy. But he was cute. He was decided to come and draw on my little blackboard in the middle of the lecture. So we'll record this one and see if this one's a little quieter. But nevertheless, we had a momentous election. It was the biggest election in 100 years in American history. It was colossal. We had more people vote than at any other time in American history. Mr. Trump garnered about 72 million votes, and Mr. Biden will be over 76 million votes. So he'll have won the election by over 4 million votes. I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on that because you know that the whole world was watching, right? I mean, within minutes, literally, of the announcement of Joe Biden winning the election, um, he heard from Angela Merkel, who we now consider to be the person that's kind of the leader of the free world. Who knows? Mr. Biden may be able to get that title back for the American president. I don't know. We'll see. But we're going to give you just a shortened version of what we covered in political science today. You'll hear me use a term a lot. It's called lame duck. Now, this is not a disrespectful thing at all. Some might say, oh, what are you calling Mr. Trump a lame duck? No, he is a lame duck president. We've been using this term for 200 years. Essentially, what it means is after you lose an election, there's a window, in our case right now, about 75 days long, where everybody's kind of moving on to the next president. And you're this person still that's acting as president. But, you know, nobody's really paying attention. And the term we came up with it for in history was the lame duck period. It's a specific term in history, political science. And that's really interesting because a lot of interesting things can happen during the lame duck. For example, Lincoln, during the lame duck period where he was elected president, 7 states leave the Union and the Civil War starts. And he can't do anything about it because he hasn't, you know, he can't take the oath of office until the lame duck period is over. So that lame duck president was called Buchanan, right? So no disrespect here. This is just the term we use. Every president goes through this. Obama went through it. Every president, after the election's over and there's a new president, everybody looks forward to the new leader, right? And that's just a natural thing to do. Well, here's what happened. We had a history-making election. This is beyond big. Not since the election of the first African-American president in 2008 have we had a moment like this where we have the first woman ever elected to the vice presidency of the United States, Kamala Harris. We also have the oldest president ever to be elected, a person who was totally retired, came out of retirement in order to fight for what he thought was the soul of America and to take the country away, essentially, from President Trump. It was a colossal election. It'll be talked about forever and ever and ever. But the titles now for these two people are President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. And of course, both of their stories are amazing. We'll tell you about Biden today. We'll tell you about Kamala Harris next time, because there's a lot to talk about. We won't spend a whole hour on it. We'll get to some Roman history here too, but let's jump in. Some of the sweetest words ever since the Athenian democracy was established is the people have spoken. And when the people vote, it's majority rules. And the vast, majority, we're talking about 4 million more, said we want Biden to be the president going forward. And it was the cleanest election we probably ever had. We had, because of the coronavirus, we had these big open areas that observers from both parties were at every counting location across the country. This has been set up for decades, actually. But the way we vote now is completely changed. It's much better. It's much safer. We can get more people involved with this mail-in balloting, voting early. It was just a colossal success as democracies go. This election was about as good as it can be run, period. And so when people are saying it was stolen, it was fraud, well, just forget all that because it's nonsense. It was a clean, fair election, and Biden wins. How big did he win? Well, it was very decisive. Basically, right now, as it stands, Joe Biden needed 270 to win. He's at 279. When Pennsylvania put him over the top, and Nevada now basically projected that Biden had it, and there's no way his counterpart could catch up. There's still 4 states that we don't know the outcome yet for sure. looks like North Carolina is narrowing, but not fast enough. With only 2% of the vote, it looks like uh, President Trump will hold on to North Carolina, and it's 15 electoral votes. Georgia's the big surprise. Georgia has been a red Republican state since, well, Lincoln's time, um, and it flipped blue. Joseph Biden is now ahead by 10,000 votes there. Nobody saw this could happen. I didn't believe it could happen this election cycle. I thought it would happen in the future because the state's changing. People are moving in from all over the world, all over the country. And Georgia now may be a blue state, blue for Democrats, red for Republicans. Arizona, always been a red state since way back when. It's really too close to call there. In this case, the president is catching up, right, a little bit. So we'll see if he has enough room in that 2% to pass Biden and capture that state. Alaska, they're just slow to count because it's so big and they got to bring it in with COVID and everything. But it'll go for President Trump. So Alaska, North Carolina will probably go for Trump. These two states will probably go for Biden as it stands today, which would give Biden 306 electoral votes, which is exactly the number that President Trump won 4 years ago, which he calls the biggest victory of all time. So I guess this is for Biden is the tie for the biggest victory of all time. We'll see. It'll be interesting if that happens. We'll know more in a few days after these states finish their early counting. But we do know this: it's over. The election is over. It was decided by the American people on Tuesday night. It just took us a few days to count. Now, here's the deal. For Biden, the third time's the charm. He ran for president before and lost once, twice, and it didn't look like he had a chance this third time around. And so it's one of the great stories in American political history. We'll be talking about this for a century to come. And what's so interesting about it too, and I want to jump to the picture of, you notice that in the speech that she's going to give, or at least that you'll hear on Wednesday, she's wearing white. That's because it was 100 years ago this year that women had the right to vote for the first time, and white is the color of the suffragette movement that brought the change that allowed women the right to vote 100 years ago. So here it is, 100 years later, the first woman vice president elect in American history. So it's a pretty cool moment, no doubt about it. All right, well, let's talk about Joe Biden for a second. As a kid growing up, he grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, scrappy working class neighborhood, no doubt about it. And he had a stutter. He had a really bad stutter. And in those days, they didn't quite have the therapists we have today and the people that can help and the training. And so he had to fight through this with his mom. His mom was his coach, and he kept working on it and working on it. And now he's president of the United States. In this speech, you're going to hear, if you listen for it kind of at the end, as he's getting a little tired, and he's the oldest president ever in American history, wins by the most votes ever in American history. He is literally an historic president. But you'll hear a little bit of that stutter come back out again. He's such a kind and compassionate person because he's been through so much. The thing that everybody says about Joe Biden is his sincerity, his compassion, and his empathy for others. When he's out and about campaigning or whatever, and he hears about a young person who maybe has stutter, he will go seek him out and talk to them and tell them about his story, and then give him his personal phone number to call if they want to talk to him about how they can overcome that disability. And he just does this for he's just, as president, you can't be giving out your personal phone number to everybody like that, but still, that's the kind of guy he is. He's very religious, probably in terms of attending church and being active in his religion, is probably the most active in his religion of any president since Jimmy Carter back in 1970s. Jimmy Carter was an evangelical Christian. Joseph R. Biden is a Roman Catholic. And it's interesting that we're going to start, next lecture will be on the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, of course, allows this religion to take root, saves the empire for a while, as we're going to talk about, but then becomes the basis of the Roman Catholic Church, to which he is a member. So that's kind of a nice little transition for our next lecture, which we'd be having today, by the way, if it weren't for this election. So So that's interesting. So we're going to get the origins then of the church that our current president now belongs to. He goes to mass, regularly and prays all the time. So that's interesting. So he's a very pious person, right? Religious person in that regard. Okay, so now here's what happens. He gets into politics. He's a young man. He runs for the Senate, barely old enough to run. In fact, when he ran, he wasn't quite old enough. You have to be 30 years old, right? His birthday was going to happen after the election. He was going to be one of the very youngest senators ever elected to the U.S. Senate, and then this happens. He wins the election. He's in Washington, D.C., getting his office ready and preparing to move his family there, for when he becomes a senator. And his wife is in the car with the family, and she goes through an intersection and gets broadsided. His wife is killed. His daughter is killed. And both of his sons are in the hospital in critical condition. He rushes to their bedside, deals with all this grief. And as the boys mended, he made them a promise: I will be home every night for you. In fact, he wasn't going to take his position in the Senate. He was going to say no to it. But the senators said, no, come on, you got to do this. We'll come to you. You can be sworn in the hospital. And then when you're ready and your family's ready, you come and come to the Senate and you can start your work later. And he did that. And then every single night, he would get on Amtrak, which is the train, take the train from DC to Dover, Delaware, to be home with his boys. And weekends too. And so, he wasn't one of these guys that could go out and, use his extra time to make more money and all that kind of stuff. He had to focus on his job as a senator. And for most of the time he was in the Senate, he was the poorest senator, period. But his commitment to his boys meant more. And then years later, he met Jill Biden, his current wife, and they raised the boys together. And she's an educator. She teaches community college. When he was vice president, she continued to teach, and she's going to continue to teach as first lady. She's an amazing, amazing person. You'll hear him talk about her in the speech. And then as he's getting ready to think, well, maybe after Barack leaves the presidency, I'll run for the presidency again. And his one son, the oldest son, got cancer. He was a war hero, war veteran. He was attorney general for the state of of Delaware. Maybe had president written all over him as if he had made it, but he got cancer and passed away. So that's why Biden didn't run 4 years ago. He was deep in grief, wanted to be with his family, and then he retired. But Mr. Trump brought him out of retirement because he ran a campaign, he said, for the soul of America. And so here's a person who's got deep empathy, and he takes over at one of the critical moments in American history as we see the coronavirus basically just exploding out of control. So I think he is the man for the moment, and the whole world is excited to see him. As VP and as a chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, as vice president too, he knows every leader in the world, and he knows everything that needs to be done on a world stage. So look for the United States to make a bit of a comeback in terms of its importance, in terms of helping solve the world's problems like climate change and other things. He's already said he's going to rejoin the climate change agreement in Paris. So here we have today he formed his coronavirus task force to start dealing with this pandemic. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to the victory speech. It's about 15 minutes long. Listen for that little stutter, that one moment. It's, here's a guy, you got to love this guy. Everybody loves Joe Biden. Democrats, Republicans, that I've never heard anybody that ever worked with him that had a bad word to say about him, that actually worked with him in the Senate, that knew him. If you had a personal problem, he was the first one to call you and ask if he could help. He's just that kind of genuine guy. So let's go ahead and listen to the 46th President of the United States. Here we go.
And it is now my great honor.
Now, I do want to stop here because Kamala Harris, see how she's wearing white to honor those women that fought for 80 years to get women the right to vote. That was 100 years ago. That's kind of cool. And she gives a great speech too. We'll hear that next time. But let's go ahead and listen to this. Here's her introduction of the new future president.
To introduce the president-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
there he is, bounding onto the stage. Just a few weeks short of 78 years old, determined not to show it right now, feeling this moment. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., who will be the 46th President of the United States. Fist bump for these times. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris first brought together by Joe Biden's late son, Beau, who's Attorney General of Delaware. Kamala Harris served as Attorney General of California. They worked together. Had a warm relationship, tested during the campaign as she went on the attack during the first debate, but they overcame that. And tonight she celebrates being the first woman Vice President-elect of the United States.
Hello, my fellow Americans, and the people who brought me the dance, Delawareans. I see my buddy Senator Tom Carper down there, and I think Senator Coons is there, and I think the governor's around. Is that Ruth Ann? And that former Governor Ruth Ann Minner. Most importantly, my sisters-in-law, my sister Valerie. Anyway. Folks, the people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we, the people. We've won with the most votes ever cast on a presidential ticket in the history of the nation. 74 million. What I must admit has surprised me. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day. And I'm humbled by the trust and confidence you've placed in me. I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify. Who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States. And work with all my heart, with the confidence of the whole people, to win the confidence of all of you. And for that is what America, I believe, is about. It's about people. And that's what our administration will be all about. I sought this office to restore the soul of America, to rebuild the backbone of this nation, the middle class, and to make America respected around the world again. And to unite us here at home. It's the honor of my lifetime that so many millions of Americans have voted for that vision. And now, the work of making that vision is real. It's a task, the task of our time. Folks, as I said many times before, I'm Jill's husband. And I would not be here without her love and tireless support of Jill and my son Hunter and Ashley, my daughter, and all our grandchildren and their spouses and all our family. They're my heart. Jill's a mom, a military mom, an educator. And she has dedicated her life to education. But teaching isn't just what she does, it's who she is. For American educators, this is a great day for y'all. You're going to have one of your own in the White House. And Jill's going to make a great first lady. I'm so proud of her. And I'll have the honor of serving with the fantastic vice president who you just heard from, Kamala Harris, who makes history as the first woman, first black woman, the first woman from South Asian descent, the first daughter of an immigrant ever elected in this country. Don't tell me it's not possible in the United States. It's long overdue. And we're reminded tonight of those who fought so hard for so many years to make this happen. But once again, America's bent the arc of the moral universe more toward justice. Kamala, Doug, like it or not, your family, you become an honorary Biden, there's no way out. All those of you who volunteered and worked the polls in the middle of this pandemic, local elected officials, you deserve a special thanks from the entire nation. And to my campaign team and all the volunteers and all who gave so much of themselves to make this moment possible, I owe you. I owe you. I owe you everything. And to all those who supported us, I'm proud of the campaign we built and ran. I'm proud of the coalition we put together, the broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. I mean it, especially those moments, and especially those moments where this campaign was at its lowest ebb. The African-American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours. I said at the outset, I wanted to represent this campaign to represent and look like America. We've done that. Now that's what I want the administration to look like and act like. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans. The Bible tells us to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America. Now this campaign is over. What is the will of the people? What is our mandate? I believe it's this. Americans have called upon us to marshal the forces of decency, the forces of fairness, to marshal the forces of science and the forces of hope in the great battles of our time. The battle to control the virus, the battle to build prosperity, the battle to secure your family's health care, the battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country. And the battle to save our planet by getting climate under control. The battle to restore decency, defend democracy, and give everybody in this country a fair shot. That's all they're asking for, a fair shot. Folks, our work begins with getting COVID under control. We cannot repair the economy, restore our vitality, or relish life's most precious moments, hugging our grandchildren, our children, our birthdays, weddings, graduations, all the moments that matter most to us until we get it under control. On Monday, I will name a group of leading scientists and experts as transition advisors to help take the Biden-Harris COVID plan and convert it into an action blueprint that will start on January the 20th, 2021. That plan will be built on bedrock science. It will be constructed out of compassion, empathy, and concern. I will spare no effort, none, or any commitment to turn around this pandemic. Folks, I'm a proud Democrat. but I will govern as an American president. I'll work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as those who did. Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now. The refusal of Democrats and Republicans to cooperate with one another. It's not some mysterious force beyond our control. It's a decision, a choice we make. And if we can decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. And I believe that this is part of the mandate given to us from the American people. They want us to cooperate in their interest. And that's the choice I'll make. And I'll call on Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, to make that choice with me. The American story is about slow yet steadily widening the opportunities in America. And make no mistake, too many dreams have been deferred for too long. We must make the promise of the country real for everybody, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their faith, their identity, or their disability. Folks, America has always been shaped by inflection points, by moments in time where we've made hard decisions about who we are and what we want to be. Lincoln in 1860, coming to save the Union. FDR in 1932, promising a beleaguered country a new deal. JFK in 1960, pledging a new frontier. And 12 years ago, when Barack Obama made history, he told us, yes, we can. Well, folks, we stand at an inflection point. We have an opportunity to defeat despair, to build a nation of prosperity and purpose. We can do it. I know we can. I've long talked about the battle for the soul of America. We must restore the soul of America. Our nation is shaped by the constant battle between our better angels and our darkest impulses. And what presidents say in this battle matters. It's time for our better angels to prevail. Tonight, the whole world is watching America. And I believe at our best, America is a beacon for the globe. We will lead not only by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. I've always believed, many of you heard me say it, I've always believed we can define America in one word: possibilities. That in America, everyone should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. You see, I believe in the possibilities of this country. We're always looking ahead to an America that's freer and more just, ahead to an America that creates jobs with dignity and respect, ahead of America that cures diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, ahead to an America that never leaves anyone behind, ahead of America that never gives up, never gives in. This is a great nation. It's always been a bad bet to bet against America. We're good people. This is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been not able to do when we've done it together. Folks, in the last days of the campaign, I began thinking about a hymn that means a lot to me and my family, particularly my deceased son, Bo. It captures the faith that sustains me and which I believe sustains America. And I hope it can provide some comfort and solace to 230,000 Americans who've lost a loved one to this terrible virus this year. My heart goes out to each and every one of you. Hopefully this hymn gives you solace as well. It goes like this: and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, and make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And now together, on Eagles Wings, we embark on the work that God and history have called upon us to do. With full hearts and steady hands, with faith in America and in each other, with love of country, a thirst for justice. Let us be the nation that we know we can be. A nation united, a nation strengthened, a nation healed. The United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, there's never been anything we've tried we've not been able to do. So remember, as my grandpapa, our grandpapa used to say when I walked out of his home, when I was a kid up in Scranton, he said, Joey, keep the faith. And our grandmother, when she was alive, she yelled, no, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith. God love you all. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And there it is. And of course, now these iconic moments where they have these car rallies to be, socially distant, are now iconic. I mean, he won the presidency by not having mass rallies, super spreader events, but trying to make sure people were safe in their cars. And they listen to us on the radio. They have a little radio signal, and so you can listen to it, and they're honking, even from a far distance. But it's pretty incredible. This was a remarkable victory because it's virtually impossible to beat a president who's what we call an incumbent, who's been there 4 years. But this president, of course, lots of things happened, and as a result, he lost the confidence of the majority of the American people, and Joe Biden gained that confidence. And so that's kind of where we're at right now in our country. So it's an important new page in our country's history that we're embarking on right now. So let's see, is there any others I wanted to get to? No, we'll save those for next time. So we'll do more with Kamala Harris next time, and we'll talk about that historic moment and her historic life story. All right, well, now we'll kind of pause there and get back to the Romans, but look how much we owe the Athenians now. I mean, this is the evolution of the Athenian democracy. It's also, right, the evolution of the Roman system of government, of laws, and so on. The Senate is an important feature of our government. The Electoral College is very much a Republican kind of idea. And I think what we have here, frankly, in Joe Biden, is another Cincinnatus, somebody who came out of retirement to address the needs of the country. And that reminds me, there was more I wanted to talk about, to address the needs of the country, which at a very critical moment, and that is the coronavirus. We've got a situation where during the lame duck period of our history, bad things can happen. For example, Lincoln wins the election, but it's months before he can take the oath of office. Back then, they didn't swear them in until March 4th. And so he is kind of in limbo, and President Buchanan is unable to hold the country together. And 11 southern states leave the country before Lincoln could even become president. He had no power to do anything. He had to wait. So lame duck periods can be very tricky. There was another lame duck period where the banking system was failing. Franklin Roosevelt had just been elected president, and Hoover seemed unable to do anything about it. He was the previous president, but neither could Franklin Roosevelt do anything about it until he was sworn in on March 4th. And that was too long a period. From the lame duck period went from November 3rd-ish, 3rd to the 8th, one of those days, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, to March 4th, which was too long. So they shortened it. They shortened it in the 20th Amendment. And the 20th Amendment now, the President Biden, President-elect Biden, will become president at noon. Regardless of whatever happens, he is president at that moment. All of the nuclear codes go to him. All the military starts looking to him. Everything happens instantly at the stroke of noon on the 20th, according to the Constitution. Of course, then he's going to take the oath of office, which is in the Constitution too. And Congress will have already been meeting for several weeks before that. The crisis he's got to take on is this COVID crisis. And you guys all know, because you got the same text I did from the governor. Basically, this was a state of emergency. I've never heard one called for the state of Utah. And the last one was probably 1857, where we had a state of emergency. And basically, our COVID numbers are just out of control. And so everybody has to wear a mask now everywhere. And also to just small family gatherings and no big gatherings at all. All events for high school athletics and so on are canceled for every high school, every school. Um, they are allowing the state football championship to continue only because they can test all those players and then play the games without a crowd, and let them finish that out. But they'll test all the players like they're doing the university athletes. They're testing them every week, and any like the professionals are being done right now. That's why they can still play football. They test them very, very carefully, and anybody that gets sick, they quarantine immediately. So yeah, some semblance of normal life. But this right here is the Pearl Harbor of your time, your 9/11. This is the equivalent of that. In fact, it's much more dangerous than 9/11 ever was. So believe it or not. So we need to take precautions. And you wearing your mask are doing the patriotic duty that everybody needs to do, because you may not even have any symptoms and you may not even feel it, but you could, without even knowing it, be spreading the virus. So wearing your mask will keep other people safe, and it'll keep others from getting the virus, which might protect then a lot of old people like me, who would not do so well with this virus, or those with asthma and other conditions. You guys have heard this over and over again, but it's now more important than ever, because look at our country. We are the worst country in the world at spreading the virus right now. Okay. So we've got to turn this around. And President elect Biden has now picked a co-chair for the new COVID committee that will address this for him. He was formerly this U.S. Surgeon General of the United States, a real expert. Vivek Murthy, really, really great talent. And then the other co-chair is David Kessler, who is he was former head of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which is the group that has to approve the vaccine and make sure that it's safe and effective. Really important job. And he's done this job before. He's also a professor at UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, which has one of the great medical centers, and they're really great at this stuff. It's like Stanford's nearby as well, and so they have a great medical center. So this is really a great guy to help lead us through this. And then of course you have Kamala Harris, who is the acting, will be president if anything ever happens to Joe Biden. So we hope they both stay safe and things go well. And but the biggest crisis that we faced literally since World War II is on our doorstep, is at our feet. And now is the time, I know people are tired. We have to wear masks, we have to do this and that. But now is the most important time to sacrifice for others and to do what you got to do to keep yourself and your family and your grandparents safe. And that's really who you're doing it for. So bless your hearts for doing what you need to do. All right. Well, okay, let's change gears entirely. Okay. So we know we've learned a lot from the Romans about how we should conduct ourselves. You notice how important giving a speech was? That speech is important. To be able to deliver a speech to the American people, that was a skill that the Romans drilled into their young future leaders so that they could be that inspiring. Like the speech, for example, that Mark Antony gave at the funeral of Julius Caesar. And you go on and on and on. It's really important. It's called rhetoric. It's called, that's it. But it was really, the Greek teachers that were teaching this to the Roman kids, and they would use this to keep their empire moving forward. Kind of an important little connection there. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about construction now in the Roman Empire. Now, this is kind of an important topic because the Romans were massive builders, where the Greeks had, great architecture and were great builders. These guys accomplished the same kinds of level of construction on a much grander scale, bigger, better, just in every way. The Romans were amazing engineers and architects. And so they took their inspiration from the Greeks, but they also made it even more important. And some of these columns that were built back in those days are still standing, all these, centuries later. Now, the problem with it, this is the form. This is where, by the way, here's the Vatican. We'll talk about the Vatican separately. the heart and soul of the Roman Catholic Church, right? But here's kind of a grainy shot. I'm sorry about the quality of this image, but this is where the old Forum, the old Senate used to be. And it would have been considered kind of like a mall shopping center, kind of an outdoor shopping area mixed with the seat of government. So it'd be like that. I mean, be like DC, only it's also where the mall is. It's actually a big shopping mall. So there'd be a lot of activity and a lot of things going on there. And anyway, it was massive. It was colossal. Here's kind of an artist rendering of what it might have actually looked like to scale with the people here. Now it was all built with slave labor, of course. That you should know that too. But the sculptures that was amazing. But a lot of these were destroyed because they were pagan. And we're going to have a transition from paganism to Christianity. So getting rid of all the pagan gods and all that was a big thing. And sadly, a lot of these things were destroyed or partially ruined, and that's too bad. But nevertheless, wow, what builders the Romans were. This is a site that's really important. It's Pompeii. And there was a volcano named Vesuvius that erupted and just covered this entire Roman city, that and Herculaneum, which is right next to it. And they were just covered. And basically, Roman life at those places stopped in their tracks. The people were buried in ash, and everything was just intact. And they're uncovering all this, and they're digging it all up. And it's one of the architectural wonders of the world. Frankly, it was a terrible tragedy, but we're able now to learn so much about what they ate, what their lives were like, what normal homes looked like. All this kind of stuff is now available to us because of that tragic accident. Now, the Romans were masters of a thing called the arch. They would deploy this great architectural achievement in order to build these colossal aqueducts that would haul water for hundreds of miles, literally, into Rome. Rome didn't have enough water of its own. The Tiber River wasn't enough. So they bring in water from the mountains and everything else, and they had to cross big areas of gullies and that kind of thing to get the water there. And some of them are still working, which is insane, right? But the weight of all of this, if you just built a huge wall, first of all, you couldn't get underneath it to go back and forth, but also too, it wouldn't have worked. So what did they do? They used the arch. Now the arch wasn't really used by the ancients, right? It was classical period where it becomes something, a feature, and it's held up by a keystone, right? And isn't it interesting? Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State, and it was the state that made Joe Biden president of the United States. It's also where he was born, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. I just throw that in because we're talking about keystones. But anyway, here's the keystone. And then they would literally cover this up with dirt is what they would do. They have a big mound of dirt. And then they'd lay these down and then dig the dirt out, and it would hold the weight. How? Well, all of the gravity works the same way. It all pushes down. And when it hits the keystone and these stones, the weight of the upper structure, which would collapse anything below it, is pushed out onto these piers, they're called. And the piers then take the weight, and then they have these huge foundations. And down here, they'd have concrete. These guys were the people that perfected the use of concrete. We think it was an invention on the island of Crete. The Macedonians used some of it. But these guys, perfected concrete. We have a more modern formula, which was invented in France and England about the time the United States became a country. So we formulate it a little bit different now, so it sets up faster and that kind of thing. But it's basically the same stuff. And unbelievable buildings that they were able to build. Another thing they really loved were like what we called spa gymnasiums kind of thing, where they had these big pools, a hot pool, cold pool, and they bathed. Every afternoon, you'd take the afternoon off and go to the baths, and it was a gymnasium kind of setting, and hang out, have lunch, and then you'd be able to swim. The thing is, the pools were heated. Some were cold, some were hot, but the heated ones, slaves would burn big fires, boil water and pour it, make sure it was pumped into here. And it's amazing. Look at these structures. Look at the ceiling. When you look at the ceiling, that's stone. And how did they get that stone? Well, it was the keystone concept that allowed this to work. And notice that the weight's being channeled down to these piers on the side. It's going to be the key to Gothic architecture later. If you look down here, here's an actual Roman road that still exists. there's pieces of it that still exist, and they keep it, you know, going for tourists and stuff, so people can kind of see what it would have been like. And it's pretty impressive. Now, the problem with all of the Roman architecture and that is, and why it fell into such disarray, was because the people living in around, as Rome collapsed from about 1 million people down to, you know, 15 to 30,000, those people still needed building materials. So rather than go cut a bunch of stones themselves, they just run over to the ruins and steal whatever they needed. And because to them, it was just a pile of rubble, let's use it. They didn't have the concept we have today of preservation of history. And so a lot of it just ends up, you know, being used in other people's houses later, which, you know, you can understand that. But this was the great structure in the middle of Rome. And if you ever get a chance, go to the Colosseum. Now, don't start your tour there. It's a day-long tour. Go instead to the Palatine Hill, the rear entrance, because there's no lines. If you start here, it's a 45-minute to 3-hour line just to get in to see this. And then you can go to the other sites. Go to the other sites first. And then when you come here, you don't have to stand in line. You can go straight in. So just a little secret when you visit what's called the Eternal City, and don't miss this. This is the Pantheon where they honored all their gods. And this roof right here is cement. They made it as cement. It was so heavy though, they took little, basically pots. They made these little pots and they infused it into the mix so that it would lighten up the structure so it wouldn't be so heavy. And they have this beautiful oculus at the top. I was there on a rainy, sunny day. It was rain and sun, rain and sun. And it was so beautiful, the light coming through. But then the rain would hit here, right? But he'd stay dry on the outside. And all the gods were honored all around this ring. And that's why I call it the Pantheon of gods. So all of these gods of the Roman paganism were in this beautiful building. So we'll stop right there with Roman construction. It's a great place to stop. And next time we'll introduce you to Kamala Harris, and we'll also talk about the rise of Christianity, which would save Rome from collapse. So that's a big story, the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay. All right, you guys, we'll catch you later. And thanks for the 3-minute warning. I really appreciate that.